Okay, welcome everyone. It's 2 o'clock. I will slowly get the show started by sharing the screen and sort of setting the stage for today's webinar. Mode. Um, First, we'll go through the introductions of myself and the panel. We'll talk really briefly in a way to set the stage for the context of risk management, especially risk management in construction. And then we'll basically get into talking about photo documentation, the topic of today's webinar, as a risk management tool in construction, discuss some technology considerations when it comes to photo documenting, and then really wrap it up with some main takeaways. Again, feel free to ask questions as we go along. We'll try to address as many of them as possible along the way, or leave them for the end to the extent that's more appropriate. So, myself, Sly, I've founded Photo and Mobile back in 2013. Used to run a commercial real estate fund in Croatia as executive investment director, and really that's where the idea of photo in and automating photo documentation came about. Through that commercial real estate fund, really got to see different types of project, including development, redevelopment, and even maintenance. So really understand the applicability of photo documentation across the board, on top of actually having a degree in risk management from University of Georgia MBA program. I will go ahead and actually introduce our panelists for today, but I'll allow them to also say a few words. So Todd Armstead, Regional Safety Manager for DPR Harden Construction, a certified safety professional, and really has a lot of experience in the construction world. He used to be a superintendent as well. And then we have Rob McKinney, originally from the construction industry, also heavily involved with the AGC in Georgia, and most recently moved on to Excel Caitlin as a construction risk engineer. Welcome, gentlemen, and thank you very much for joining us today. Feel free to say a few words if you find it necessary, relevant.
That's a pretty good introduction, so I appreciate it.
Not a problem.
I'm good, Sly. Thank you.
There we go. Let's keep on going. So risk management in construction. What, how, who. So basically I wanted to do a very simplified version of my education in risk management, and just sort of talk about risk and risk cause drivers in a very high level to set the stage, and then really again talk more about construction and the topic of today. So what drives the costs of risk? Probably very intuitive. It's the frequency of the events, so how often do they happen, and how big of a deal those events are. Something that might be a small thing, and if it happens once in a while might not be worthwhile managing, where obviously those that happen very frequently or have a big impact on the bottom line, very relevant to take note and then engage in managing those risks. Generally speaking, the main risk management options, again, as discussed academically, is you can always not engage in a certain activity that causes risk, i.e. eliminate the risk. You can prevent the risk, and I think we'll talk a lot about that today, and at least try to talk about how some of these risks can be prevented, and then actually mitigate the risks by lessening their occurrence or lessening the severity or the impact of the risk that comes to bear. Or we can transfer the risk, which is, I think, a very relevant piece to also discuss, where hopefully Rob is going to have some thoughts to share for us from an insurance perspective. Who all is involved? C-level management in the operations, legal compliance, insurance providers, service providers to the companies, vendors, government. Like you can tell, everyone, everywhere, all the time is engaged in either risk or risk management activities, whether they know it or not. Uh, I'll keep on going, and again, if there's any questions, we can even come back to these slides. So let's talk about the risk management in construction and what is really the scope that it takes, or that it manifests itself in construction. And I'll ask our panelists, really as the experts, to talk more about that before we get to the actual photo documentation. I've done some very simplified, again, trying to keep it simple for as an outline of the conversation of what the sources of risks and costs are. So I want to start with safety and talk about something like a workers' comp, injuries that happen, but obviously there's much more to this piece. And maybe I'll ask, or I'll go ahead and ask Todd to maybe give his, if you will, an introductory thoughts on safety risks as he sees them and engages them in the construction space.
Yeah, thank you, Sly. You know, when I think about risks, you know, from DPR Hardin's perspective, not necessarily in Atlanta, but countrywide, we average 4.5 to 5 million man hours per year. We do drywall work, whether it's framing, hanging, finishing, ceilings. We also have a pretty large concrete operation out west. So when we look at workers' comp, we're not just looking at, we look at the 4 million man hours we have and, taking care of our folks, but we also do a lot of CSIP projects. And I'm assuming that most people in the call are familiar with the contractor controlled insurance program. So we're also taking on a lot of risk there, managing workers' comp from a subcontractor market perspective as well. So a lot of our energy and effort is geared towards avoiding workers' comp in the first place. Whether we're doing job site inspections or we're doing training. But then we do spend a fair amount of time after the fact on claims management. So, we got a huge risk there. Also, some other risks we have are just risks to the public. We work a lot of urban areas, a lot of downtown situations. We got a lot of pedestrians, car traffic close to our projects. So, making sure that we're doing an adequate job of protecting the public is also a huge concern for us in the area of risk.
Very cool. Thank you very much, Todd, for that. We'll come back to this, by the way, for the audience. There's some slides later where we'll go a little bit deeper into the safety aspects of actually managing safety and the safety risks in the construction site. So stay tuned. That's more just like an introduction to that aspect. Also talking about damages, or from a quality perspective that happen, and just giving some examples from my end in terms of seeing what the weather can do to the project, and has that been managed? Can you actually prevent it, or how do you deal with unavoidable events, or for example, let's say hurricane or the force majeure? Then defects in terms of how do you make sure that everything gets done the way it's supposed to, so you don't have the rework and the cost associated with defective workmanship initially, and then also talking about legal in terms of penalties and fees that might be paid because the government comes in and is trying to figure out what's going on, and then also as it relates to insurance. So given Rob's prior experiences that also spans on the quality control and now from insurance perspective, and he's worked a lot even with OSHA. Rob, if you wanted to add any comments here, feel free to jump in.
You bet, Sly. I appreciate it. I'll tell you, one of the biggest changes I've seen in the industry is the new proliferation of technology. It makes it easier than ever before to properly document projects. When I first started back in 2001, 2002, a few superintendents might have had the big digital cameras, and they might have taken 1 or 2 pictures a day. How did they get those in the office? How could you ever find them? Even up to 4 or 5 years ago, anybody taking pictures on a construction site, whether it be for safety, for an accident, or for a hazard, or quality control for work going into play, they really weren't still taking that many photos. And even the ones that we were taking, it was extraordinarily difficult to get that documentation of your project to prove that you did things right or show the conditions, to get that to your server and be able to find it. So the question a lot of people need to ask themselves, how well are you actually documenting your project activities? How easy is it to do that? And, with the new smartphones, the new tablets, the new solutions that are out there, people can now take multiple photos a day. You can project taking multiple pictures or videos a day to show that you had things safe, to show that conditions were adequate. Or what if you have rain delays? What if you have damaged materials? What if there's vandalism? Fill in the blank. If you can now take dozens of pictures on a project daily and build that archive and be able to find them, sort them, and more importantly, search and find them when you need them, that's really the key. I've been on the bad side of too many, let's say, claims that should have gone a different direction, but if you do not have proof that you did things properly, if you can't find that photo to show that you had things taken care of, it's very painful to be in that scenario. But a lot of companies are getting more and more smart with it to try and reduce your risk. In some cases, you're able to transfer that risk, but you have to be documenting things properly and trying to move your program forward. So hopefully some people that are listening today get that message.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And that's a great segue in what we're going to be talking about going forward. Maybe just a kind of anecdotal question to ask you for an anecdotal comment in thinking about, let's say, quality control and these penalties and safety. What would you say, at least from what you've seen from Excel, Caitlin, what kind of distribution would you say that at the end, from an insurance perspective, that you see? Like, would quality be more of a costly risk, or would it safety? How would you order these three buckets? And again, anecdotally, no hardcore numbers, but just based on your experience, what have you seen?
I'd have to say they're almost all equal, believe it or not. Every company's different, every project risk are different. But for example, let's say safety. If you have a fatality, you're looking at a 7-digit claim off the bat. If you're talking about damages, what if you have a catastrophic failure of the Windows system? And you start getting into legal with third-party claims. I mean, you could have one home run in any of those fields that could be very bad, very detrimental to the company. And without proper documentation to defend the company, to basically show, here are the best practices we use. Here are the standards in place. Here are the real conditions at the time. The old adage is, a picture's worth 1,000 words. You got to kind of multiply that in today's times. The more pictures you have to show things were done properly across the board can help defend claims of any nature, I would say.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. I'll offer some numbers, and we'll get into the photo documentation. You're giving us a great segue, and I don't want to lose on that. So, some numbers that I dug up in preparation for this, and just again to set the stage for the scope: 6.5 million workers in construction, 252,000 construction sites. So again, a number that I dug up, and this is from a few years before. In terms of safety, 25,000 injuries per year just due to falls from stairways and ladders. Cost per injury, and again, just to throw some numbers to really create importance around talking about risk and safety, 27,000 in construction, which is actually 2 times more than for overall industry in the United States, at least in 2002. An old number, but still, I think, relevant just to talk about it. And then, as you were just mentioning, wanted to throw this big number out there, just in terms of defect claims. The U.S. insurance industry pays over $5 billion annually just to settle them. So really staggering numbers. Obviously, a lot of risks in construction. So let's take Rob's segue from a little bit earlier and talk about photo documentation. I think Rob kind of answered this question already for us in terms of calling out the importance of having good documentation and actually using the visuals. So let me give sort of our perspective from Photo In and why we even exist and why we're focused on this space separately. I was kind of surprised by this number, but the research shows that the brain processes visuals 60,000 times faster than text. So we're not talking about 5x, 10x. This is an extreme difference, and that's the whole picture is worth 1,000 words. What you can see on a screen or on a picture on a document gets processed by brain much faster than actually having to read the text and understand what somebody was trying to say. And not only that, again, some hard numbers across Fortune 1000 companies, 217 billion was spent on office documentation. And I'll give you some other. This basically in 2002, this was $7,500 per employee. All associates did the research, and resource information systems also estimates about 8 billion per year just on managing paper. Then why talking about it in terms of photos and digital versus paper? PricewaterhouseCoopers estimated that average organization spends about $20 in labor just to file each paper document, and then about 120 in labor to search for the misfiled document, and $220 per document in recreation. So really, again, staggering numbers. Obviously, all of our time goes on documenting and the documentation. And really, here we want to talk about potentially a different way to do it. Again, thanks to Rob for calling out that technology is really the driver behind looking at different ways to deal with this issue. So I'm going to really quickly throw out some use cases just to, again, sort of throw out what should be considered as we are having this discussion, and hopefully there's going to be some good questions about it. But documenting as-built conditions, quality control, safety management, the ones we talked about, reporting progress to owners, managing the risk of expectations and what somebody really thought that they were getting, again, to avoid rework, etc. Daily reporting, having an audit trail if the government is coming to check what's going on. Operationally, in terms of the communication and leveraging, again, the visuals versus just text in RFIs, punch lists, change orders, and then overall reducing the exposure when warranties come years after the project has been done, or there's some kind of a litigation or a dispute either between the trades or the trades with the GC with the owner. Really, the photos across the board are very valuable to the company in many different aspects, but not just to the company, but also to the company's client and all other stakeholders involved in the construction process. I'll do a few more slides and then we'll kind of get back to, and I'll ask Todd and Rob again to share some thoughts with us as the experts from their perspective, but really to, again, talk about why it's not just capturing a photo. Really, there's information and context that goes together with it, reports that need to be created, and then using a bunch of different tools to actually do that. Then how do you file it? How do you process it? How do you transfer it to where you need to go? How do those photo files get organized? Are they named? Where are they filed? So that they can be actually used and you can take action on them. Are they easily retrieved? Can you actually verify what that photo represents, where it has been taken? Can you repeatedly use that photo rather than having it trapped in some PDF paper form? Again, we just talked about the cost of managing paper. And can you actually share those visuals across the organization to create even more value? This is now where I want to I'm going to again lay out some things, and then we'll hear from Todd and Rob about sort of their thoughts. So I'll go back to Todd first and talk about, I'm not going to do it. Was thinking maybe we go one at a time, but maybe I'll put up safety compliance in general. And then as Todd and I have discussed this, it's sort of looking at these differences, how it was done before, and maybe where the future of this and where the future of the safety compliance is going and how photos can help. So I'll hand it over to Todd to share sort of his thinking and thoughts on safety compliance and photo documentation as it relates to safety compliance.
Yes, so when I visit job sites all across the country, but specifically in the Southeast, and really what I'm looking for are two things when I go to a job site. I'm looking to make sure that our site's compliant with federal regulations and in some cases state regulations that may be stricter than the feds. And I kind of call those the static situations. Do we have handrails up? Are they properly constructed? Do we have safe access to the site? And a lot of the things that we look at in terms of compliance are static. Once you've installed them correctly, they should stay correct until something else changes. So I think one mistake our industry makes is we spend a little too much time looking at compliance items. But you look at the things that are actually causing our accidents in the field, it's normally behavior. I call those the dynamic influences. So it's the workers doing things or the environment the workers are in that leads towards accidents. So I go out and just try to check compliance items. That's normally the really fast part of my inspections. And I do take pictures if I see something that's not correct, so I can kind of point out to a team, give them a good idea what I don't like. But I spend more time just watching the workers actually performing the tasks, checking to see that the behavior is safe behavior. And again, it's helpful to be able to document this. It's, if I use your traditional safety audit format, even today, still probably paper-based if people are doing the inspections at all. Paper doesn't really communicate the message that you want to get across as well as a photo will. So I do a lot of photo documentation, and the ability to annotate photos and actually get into descriptions and give more explanations enables me to communicate with a larger audience. So I do think a large part of what we do in safety should be educational. We need to be educating our teams in the field, because honestly, my safety staff isn't as large as some people might think it would be. I'm really relying on job sites to be able to manage their own safety, to look after their own risks. But in order to be effective, they have to have education, they have to have reinforcement. But we also want to educate the workers. A lot of companies have these policies where if a worker steps out of line, you kick them off the job, which sometimes you have to do, but you think about it, if you take a worker and kick him off the job site, he's going to go down the street, work on another site, and he's still as unsafe as he was before. So we're trying to take education to a different level and actually educate the workers themselves. And again, using photographs, we can take a picture of something, show the guys what we're looking for, annotate it. I've actually seen workers in the process been able to take pictures of what they're doing, stop them, kind of walk them through what we need to see them doing, and then I can email them a report and get a PDF with a picture of themselves and kind of some things we talked about. So just looking for ways to increase knowledge in the field at all levels and to make safety something that the workers care about differently than they have in the past. And kind of looking at, that's kind of the difference there between the organizational and the individuals. It's one thing to make our teams better, but I think we're even better if we can make the workers on our job sites better. And it's kind of an industry-wide approach. If the guys on my job site are safer, they go down the street to another contractor's job site, they're going to be safer there as well. And we're kind of raising the level of the entire industry if we can do it this way. So that's kind of my take on how we should look at safety compliance and where the documentation really benefits us.
Awesome, Todd. Thank you very much. And I know you and I have talked about this, and I thought that these sort of three, for some people, it would be, well, of course, and it is well, of course, when you see it written down and the way you talk about it, and yet, even when we talk to customers, it's not necessarily like that in the field. We'll hear a lot of, we told them to do it that way. Yet the behavior maybe has not changed, and maybe it was too much, well, I told him, and it ends up being sort of on the individual level versus the organization supporting that way of thinking. So I'm right there with you, and glad that to hear that really the visuals end up being the ones that sort of make the difference. And again, we'll have more opportunity to come back to this and see if our audience has some specific questions here. Al, again, from a quality perspective, we've talked about it before, and I think this is the one where everybody feels the pains because it happens on a regular basis that there's something has to be redone, or even if the operationally the workers don't know that there's warranties, the management does. and in terms of the resolving disputes. And I'll try to tie in that by asking Rob, who has an emergency, if he's still online. Let me see, to basically tell us from. Yeah, he's still here to tell us a little bit more about the quality piece and then the insurance audits and legal aspect as to what he sees now out in the field from his perspective as a risk engineer at Excel, Caitlin. Rob, you still there? Okay, I think Rob might have had to split off. He had an emergency that he got called on. So really, I'll fill in the pieces here, and then if there's any questions for Rob, we can address them as a follow-up to the webinar. Basically, what Rob and I have discussed that from an insurance perspective, both quality and safety, what you do and how you actually manage it can actually have an impact on the premium and the perspective of the level of risk from an insurance perspective. That can impact the premium. It can also impact your ability to cover the work in terms of bidding and qualifying to bid for certain sites, and then obviously, whether you're exposing yourself to any kind of government penalties ends up being a big deal. And this is when Rob and I discuss it, especially now him moving from being in construction and actually working as a risk manager, safety manager, and looking at it from a insurance perspective. The processes that the companies have in place end up being a big deal in terms of how the insurance company actually looks at it. So now I want to talk a little bit more about photo documentation strategy, and we've heard Rob also throw in some, and Todd did as well, but maybe to take a little bit holistic approach, if you will, in terms of just thinking about, what are the objectives, what are we trying to do with photo documentation, and really developing a whole strategy around it so that we can actually implement activities and steps in the risk management process that will be supported by photo documentation. So we really first have to ask ourselves, why are we doing it? Is it safety mostly important? Is it a quality control? Or do we want to cover it all, define that, then basically see who is going to do it and who is it going to impact? Can we leverage photo documentation to really create a higher level of accountability, more responsibility, and be able to educate, like Todd was talking about? So if we have visual proof of what is being done, and it becomes more of a behavior and an organizational attitude towards risk management, it will impact people, but let's consider that in the strategy of what we want to do in terms of photo documentation, and really understand who's supposed to do what, and how the whole team, down from the foreman, superintendent, all the way to the high level executives, is going to hold everybody accountable to get it done right, so that it can actually create the benefits that are desired. So in that sense, this is, again, from a business perspective, very important to have the executive sponsorship. Todd and I talk a lot about putting safety first. I use the reference of airline companies where they will literally do anything and everything until they can ensure that really safety has been followed. There are no shortcuts. Some light goes on in the cockpit and the plane stays there and doesn't go anywhere until they can figure out what's going on. I'm not necessarily suggesting the same level, but really using the reference that you can put safety first, and you can bring the overall process where everybody understands that safety is that important, and then really drive the benefits that come with that. Airlines are still the safest form of travel, and they actually obviously can reduce that cost and that severity and frequency of bad things happening because they're making safety be number one. But changing that behavior is also a consideration. So now if everybody's going to have to take photos, or some people are going to need to take photos, how is that going to look like? How are we going to manage through that change? Definitely needs to be considered in this strategy. And let's not forget that the feedback loop is basically, have we confirmed that what needed to be done has been done? Do we believe in the data integrity? Another one of those where we talk about checklists. And in my conversations with a lot of our customers and potential customers, sort of the idea comes up, well, okay, I have this checklist on safety or a daily report, and it's a bunch of text and a bunch of yes, no's, and you think the project is perfect, but when you actually go on site, you notice it's really not that perfect. So, in a sense, is there integrity of data, and can the photos and how the photos can actually help increase that data integrity, and again, going up, make everybody accountable and responsible enough to really start changing their behavior. And another point of this webinar is really to start talking about how the technology can help in this process, and in terms of the strategy, really doing the cost benefit analysis and understanding how much of this you actually want to undertake and for what benefit, and then how much investment goes not just in terms of money, but really in terms of change management, what kind of side benefits can come from leveraging technology to really achieve these benefits of visual verification and visual photo documentation. Todd, I'll invite you to jump in whenever you feel like you have something to say versus me handing it off. I know we've talked about this, but feel free to jump in wherever you want, and I'll sort of keep going. But yeah, definitely come on in where you see necessary. So let's talk about those benefits, and I think we've discussed it even with Todd and Rob thus far. So to the extent that photos are being leveraged and documenting the field work that happens on site, what can we get from the photos? And we've heard Todd talk about it. It's basically better control and compliance. Somebody knows that it's not just being recorded in text, but really there are visuals that are proving one way or another. It increases accountability, and they can be very educational in terms of.
Hey,
Go ahead.
I had a thought here I was going to share with you. But there's a lot of talk in the groups that are doing research in the safety world. There's a difference between your safety culture and your safety climate. And pretty much every contractor I talk to, we do a lot of pre-qualification of subcontractors before they come on our job site. Without any exceptions, everybody I talk to says they have this great safety culture where safety's first, and it's the most important thing at that company. What I've learned is that when you spend a lot of time in the field, you notice that the climate, it's actually where the workers are working, doesn't always reflect the culture the companies claim to have. And so one thing I'll notice is when I can go out, I talk to a manager who says his crew is going to do, X, Y, and Z to be safe, and I can go out in the field and actually have something different. Being able to document that and communicate that, it kind of goes back to, accountability and education. We can hold people accountable to doing what they say, and the pictures just help us to do it better. And I can actually track subcontractors by name, by job site, by actual, safety issue. And maybe I want to talk about who I'm seeing troubles with at a ladder safety. Just going back and reviewing my audits that I've used on PhotoIn, I can do this in a different way, and it just gives me a different level to go out and influence people. But I've also got a way to kind of store the data and analyze it over time, and see where we're struggling and where we need to get better.
Awesome. Thanks for additional comment. I'll keep basically going along the same way. And again, as you can tell, there's a sort of a pattern here of talking about safety and quality as sort of the main drivers. So again, something that we have seen, and you have also taught, just sort of mentioned it here, to the extent that photo documentation is set up the right way, and we have gone through the strategy, and we understand what we are trying to achieve, and we have everything in place. There's these sort of sideline benefits of because of the visuals tying back that they're way faster processed, we can increase the speed of collaboration even within quality control in terms of resolving defects and issues from the field, automatically managing the risks and sort of reducing the costs associated with that. We can, to the extent we are communicating and documenting and sharing those photos and visuals, eliminate teardowns and reworks. And instead of doing it by phone and people coming out on site and having to do that whole paper thing, avoid hours and even days of back and forth communication. All this together. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say something. I mean, we're using the quality control piece right now. We've got a project team that has a question, an RFI in the field, to be able to take a picture of it, ask the question, annotate the picture, and send that straight to an architect and get an answer. We've been able to cut days out of RFI loops. We've even been able to use the tool with, city inspectors. We want to get a pour made. We're not quite ready by, the time the inspector goes home on Monday, but we really need to do the pour Tuesday. We've actually had inspectors accept photo documentation of inspection items they need to see corrected. So we found a lot of different ways to leverage these tools, not just for safety, but also for quality and to benefit our schedule as well.
Awesome. Great points and great, call it anecdotal evidence of how photo documentation can actually benefit construction companies across the board. And again, I come back to legal and compliance, and yeah, I think you just sort of talked about it right now in terms of easier audits or communication with the government. We've had points where trades. I think the one where I talked to Rob was okay. Paint went up. Somebody came in and chipped the paint. Who did it? And then really having the photos of every trade when they were finished and sort of documenting this is how we've left it. It makes the resolution of disputes much easier. And if you don't mind, again, we don't have to go too much in details, but I know you like that whole idea of the guy leveraging a photo to sort of communicate what happened in one of the claims that you guys processed. So feel free to share with the audience if you see
Well, I was going
fit.
to say, kind of another anecdotally, I know probably one of the places we see the most money lost is we get to the punch out phase, or we start putting in finishes, and all of a sudden it seems like wall damage. It's like you've got gremlins running through your job site at night with hammers putting holes in walls, and yet nobody ever takes the responsibility for it. So I've got a few trade contractors I've noticed, or when they finish a room, they'll take photos of all the walls in that room to show that, hey, when we walked out, our stuff was good. Now somebody else is going to have to help us pay to fix these problems. So I think it's a good tool not only for the general contractors in the room, but it's also a great tool for trade contractors who want to protect the integrity of their work. But we've had several incidents in recent memory where we've had injuries and we've had workers that come with claims, and photo documentation has helped us to prove that the situation wasn't what the injured person claims it to have been. And so we've been able to just protect ourselves from several claims just because of proper photo documentation. And we've had some even recent OSHA inspections. I think everybody kind of knows one of the rules is for every one picture OSHA takes on your job site, you probably want to take 3 or 4. And we've also been able to use it to help ourselves with OSHA when they've come out snapping pictures. We're snapping the same pictures, gives us a chance to study what OSHA's studying just to make sure that we are where we think we are. So there's a lot of different ways I've seen this technology being used. And I think Rob hit on it earlier. I do remember when I was the superintendent and carried around the big bulky digital camera. I remember when I carried around the disposable cameras. So the fact that I've got a smartphone with an amazing camera, it just gives us a whole nother level. It's hard to even imagine how we did business 20 years ago.
Awesome. Thank you, Todd. Let's go a little bit, maybe talk about the technology. Obviously, a lot of things out there since the mobile revolution started, and basically everybody having a phone and being able to do all this stuff as it happens, and just whip out a phone or a tablet and start shooting photos and taking notes and capturing information. So I've been to a few events recently. The AGC Technology Committee organizes events where they talk about how to leverage technology either for safety or for quality control. And we've been together to the Willis Group's Risk Management in Construction conference, where really across the board how things are documented. And then I've heard in multiple instances photos being mentioned. I guess I take that as that everybody's taking note that there is this technology out there to do different things, including the photo documentation. So here's where I would like to, I guess, you and Todd and Rob, you both have shared sort of what you see as relevant, and we've kind of collected this feedback along the way that I now want to, I guess, share with the rest of the audience and really give some for consideration. And again, we'll share this recording for later review and the slides. What we have heard from our construction clients and prospects, what are they talking about? So obviously, easy capture. What this means, it's not just okay, I snapped a photo. But how did I capture it in terms of the context of the actual workflow and what actually happens while they're working on site? Can I annotate the photos and capture some information on top of the photo? Can I associate it to the project or a category? Is this a defect? Is this a safety issue? And why? So that I can how easily is it so I don't have to manually do it? That's what people would basically say. I don't want to, every photo I take, I don't want to sit down for 5 minutes and associate all this data, but I would need to in order to be able to easily reference this photo down the line and find the right photo. What happens when you have 10,000 IMGs with random letters and numbers? How easily are you going to find that photo? Once you actually find certain photos in there of some wall. What wall is that? Why was that photo taken? Who took the photo? All that stuff, and really how easily that gets done is what we hear is sort of the main question that people ask. And then not separating that photo documentation process from the existing processes on site and the workflows. Can I use those photos across other systems that I already have in place to actually manage the project? So this is what has been requested from the market in terms of our conversations. So I would now like to offer a translation of that in terms of what should be considered when looking for a technology solution. So again, what are your objectives? What is the scope? What do you expect to get from it? And how much is that going to cost? So I think these are pretty straightforward in terms of really sitting down and writing out what you're trying to achieve with the technology solution to enable your photo documentation and photo documentation strategy. So as if you have sit down and define the photo documentation strategy, these should be sort of already answered for you. In terms of specifics, what to look for, we come again from our perspective, at least what we have heard in the market is number one, because these guys on the site are actually there to build, not to document. That's not their primary concern. So it has to be simple and easy to do the photo capture in the field. It has to be mobile, basically mobile devices. And because some construction sites happen away from internet coverage, that there's no internet required. Basically, if it's too hard, the crew doesn't use it and you don't get the photos. And then if you don't get the photos, you don't have the photo documentation, hence everything falls. Basically, there's no point to it. And in that sense, really the simplicity and thinking about the end user ends up being of paramount importance to have a successful photo documentation strategy. Can you verify the data together with the photos? versus, oh, I have the data here and here's the photo. Simplicity of that aspect of verifying and associating one to the other, extremely important. This is where I'll put up a few of these. Um, Rob mentioned it earlier. Make it efficient. Really
Yep.
talking about efficient versus laborious. If it's too many steps and too many entry points, again, the crews are not going to use it, and that whole process of photo documenting needs to be extremely efficient so that it doesn't waste time and distract from the actual building process. And because we're talking about business application, it needs to be manageable, i.e., robust admin and management functions, permissions, user permissions, different configuration options, because every construction company has a little bit different way how they like to do things. Can you easily find the photos, filter them by different categories so that you can actually leverage them for all those benefits that you expect from your mobile or from your photo documentation uh, strategy. I'm going to actually stop, and hopefully this is still projecting. Yes, it is. And just see before we wrap it up in terms of key takeaways, if there's any specific questions that we can potentially address before I kind of give my general closeout of the webinar. And I'll just give it a few seconds. Obviously, feel free to reach out to us separately, and we can address them. We can address them later. Okay, now I can see even the chats. Um, I'm not getting any questions, so for the sake of time, let me just make sure everything is playing. For the sake of time, I'll go ahead and really start wrapping it up. Todd, anything that you want to add before I sort of wrap it up?
I know, so I think you kind of covered just about everything. The only item we probably didn't cover on risks early on was just schedule risks. That's probably where we see some of our biggest challenges, or when we fail to make schedules, we can end up in situations where we got liquidated damages. So to offset that, we're working, long days, 7-day weeks. So being able to demonstrate clearly, maybe to subcontractors or to owners, where we stand at certain points in time. We've also had some losses lately where owners are unable to secure water permits from cities, and then we're closing up walls before we've ever actually been able to test things properly. So just to be able to document all the nuance, I think you've done a great job today of hitting all the different factors that photo documentation can help protect and document.
Great point, and this is why I appreciate you and Rob participating. At the end of the day, in terms of construction, you guys are the experts. We're looking at it from a photo documentation and technology perspective, and really learning along the way. So, thank you very much for adding the scheduling risk, and definitely I can see how working long days obviously increases the safety risk and the quality risk. So it's all kind of intertwined.
And it's expensive.
Yes. uh, anyway, so to the extent there's no additional comments or questions, uh, wrapping it up, key takeaways from this webinar that I hope everybody is going to get is risk management is extremely important. It impacts the bottom line directly, and it needs to be managed across the organization. And as such, executive leadership is key. It's really getting everybody on the same page and understanding that the organization from the top level cares about it enough so that even photo documentation gets prioritized as a very effective risk management tool. And think culture versus process. It's not just about doing it to get it done. There is an aspect of that as well, but it really everybody understanding what the benefits are and that everybody is going to benefit in the overall process. Those key benefits of photo documentation is risk management tool, improve the field to office communication. And think we talked a lot about that, keeping everybody accountable that the right behaviors are exhibited, whether from safety or quality perspective, and then having the visual evidence to resolve disputes, obviously a big one, and all of those together to actually additionally reduce legal compliance and insurance costs. Um, the strategy, as you develop it, think of it holistically, and do not forget to think about people and users, both on those that will actually use it once it's collected, and the ones either through the operational aspect of the construction process or post hoc after the project has been done. Think as built condition, as built documentation. So what's behind the wall? There's actually downstream impacts in maintenance and in property management. There is technology out there available to enable these processes to go faster. Something that we here at Photo In are solely focused on is really the photo documentation piece. You got to choose carefully, and you got to think that it has to be easy and it has to be user centric. If that piece is not there, the task itself sounds pretty simple, but if you think of it as a whole process, when we talk to the end users, really the easiness and that we have basically addressed the way the end users do it and the way they need to do it in order for it to make sense. It has to be there for the technology to actually deliver the value. So I'll stop there and see any additional questions. Again, the panel is for the questions is out on the right. So if there's any questions, let us know. If not, feel free to um, reach out reach out to me or just hit us up on support at Photo In. We'll be more than glad to talk to you more about this. There's going to be a recording to go out to everybody after this webinar. We'll also share the slides just in case. And it sounds like there's been instances where the slides were not showing. And also, given the interest that we have gotten for this webinar, we basically plan to turn it into a series and really talk about safety separately, quality separately, and even go down the maintenance and property management. So if any of those pieces and aspects interest you more, stay tuned for more information on that either on our website or we'll send you an invite to really come in and join or just get the recording from a little bit more deeper dives on managing safety risk, quality risk, legal, etc. So there's going to be more to come in the future. And with that, I guess I will thank everybody for joining us, for participating. Again, if you have any questions, feel reach out to me at sly@fotoin.com. Thank you very much, Todd, and thanks, Rob, for making the time to share your expertise with us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You'll have a good one.